Want to watch this episode? We're on YouTube. Just search Katie Prentiss or hit the link in the show notes. I'm Katie Prentiss, and this is Sunshine Soul. I remember flying out of Portland one gray morning. It had been raining for days. That kind of heavy, wet Pacific Northwest gray that just seeps into your bones. I had the window seat on the plane like always. And as we ascended, I watched the droplets race across the glass. The clouds outside were so thick, like walls. And for a moment, it felt like the sun just didn't even exist anymore. And then we broke through. Probably my favorite moment. The clouds fell away, and there it was, blue sky, bright light, the sun just sitting there like it had been the whole time. And it hit me in that moment. The sun is always shining, even when we can't see it. Here at Sunshine Soul, we hope, we heal, and we love despite the clouds. We remember that there's light ahead. Welcome to Sunshine Soul. Let's keep looking for the light together. I was listening to this Nick Kroll stand-up routine about moms. And what is it about moms? How do they get so under our skin and make us crazy? And here I am, a mom of 4, and I too have the same exact reactions to his stand-up. But it goes like this. He's like, what is the deal with the way we feel about our moms? And he's like, everyone's going to say, no, I love my mom. My mom and I have a great relationship. And then he says, this is how you act when your mom calls. And he pauses, pulls out his phone, sees it's his mom, and goes, fuck, under his breath. And the audience erupts because we all know you have to watch the piece. It's so hilarious. But what is this universal feeling about moms that we all have? Episode 1, My Mother is Dead. My mom is dead. My mom died in 2016 at the age of 68. We talk about moms. We talk about our stories. I feel like our stories are so interwoven to who our moms are that we can't tell who we are without also talking about them. So this is where I want to start telling my story. My mom was such a unique person. She was difficult to explain. Even now, as I embark on telling my story in this podcast, I struggle with how to articulate who this woman was. This woman that is so much the fabric of me and my story. I also happen to be at the stage of life where my children are all leaving the nest, so to speak. I call it open nest, not empty nest. But we are so intricately intertwined, like my children and me and my mom. And so I'm starting with who was my mother. My mom is Margaret Catherine Branson. She was born in Ohio. And I like to think of her as the different stages of her life. And ironically, she went by different names in a lot of these stages. So I think we can tell her story in these chapters, so to speak, that I like to think of her in. I think all of us go through so many transitions and iterations of our identity in our lifetime. I know my children could probably give different chapters and seasons of my life. I know I could. And this just helps me to process who she was. When I think of my mom from a young age, I think of her being Mommy, and I also think of her being Peggy, her more youthful nickname that she grew up going by. My mom was a happy-go-lucky, quintessential homemaker. This is what she lived for. She made homemade meatloaf and frozen mixed veggies. You got to love the Midwestern diet. She was constantly sewing clothes for herself and us. I remember fancy Easter outfits. I remember fancy Halloween costumes. My mom would take requests for our birthday cakes. What did we want our birthday cake to be that year? I requested so many different things. I remember seeing photos of bears and dolls. And probably my favorite was when she made a doll named Sally for my birthday, because I was obsessed with the name Sally in that particular year. I don't know why. And I never named a child Sally, so go figure. But my mom would do so many crafts, would bake from scratch. Like, she was just that wholesome, safe, supportive maternal figure in all of our lives. I remember feeling she was soft, she was present, and I feel so thankful for those times. I think also about just one of the memories that stands out the most to me in my childhood is just my mom's singing silly tunes. She would have a song for so many quirky little things, like when we have toast in the toaster and it would pop up, she would sing an entire song. Oh, the toast popped up, the toast popped up, the toast popped up. And we'd all join her. And I still am like, why did we sing this? She also had this little like chant song that she would sing at a red light when we were stuck, and we'd all start chanting turn green. But all of it kind of came together for these like sweet, happy childhood memories. As we got older into adolescence, I think of my mom as, of course, Mom and Peg. She went by Peg at this point in her life. Things became more interesting as I was growing as a girl with Mom. I started feeling that she couldn't give me as much of the support as I wanted as I was moving into adolescence and trying to figure out who I was, like femininity, like, you know, all the adjustments we make in our bodies and emotions and all of that. We moved from Ohio to Georgia when I was in 6th grade. And my Ohio born and bred parents stood out a little like sore thumbs in the middle of a smaller town in southwestern Georgia. And I remember feeling like we didn't quite fit in. And I feel like it was really pronounced, especially with my mom. There was one moment where our very Southern real estate agent was calling Mom and trying to give her information. And my mom said, I can't understand what you're saying. And the woman was like, I don't remember what she was saying, but it was probably like, well, Miss Peg, we just need you to sign the contract and then we'll be all done with the sale. And my mom was like, I'm sorry, what? And the woman repeated again, and my mom would say, I can't understand you. What? Eventually, my mom hung up the phone in tears because she was so perplexed by the whole conversation. But in the South, everyone has, you know, those Southern manners and that Southern charm. Everyone's like, hey, y'all, and super friendly, even if they're passive aggressive behind your back. But my mom didn't really like do all of those things. And me, being very socially aware and like the ultimate people pleaser that I am, would compensate for her. But there were times where it was just really confusing. I remember my friends calling my house and I would hear them on the family phone and I'd hear them say, hey, Miss Zach, is Katie there? And instead of saying, oh, yeah, hi, 1 second, like this might be one of my best friends, my mom would just go, she would just take the phone away from her ear, hand it to me and go, here. And I would think, why did she do that? That was so confusing to me. My mom was still her wholesome self, like still driving us around everywhere, carpooling, like, you know, we had this Burger King right behind our high school, and I remember us begging her to go through the drive-thru after school, and she would do all of those things for us. But I just couldn't figure out how to get deeper support from her. My mom would be the most like she was amazing at listening. I always felt like she was safe because I could tell her anything. She might react funny. She might be like, oh, Katie, if I went a little too far on things, but she never would get like super angry or she wasn't like a super strict disciplinarian. At the same time, I felt like she also didn't offer me super great or deeper advice. It usually would kind of be more of the surfacey, like, oh, those girls are just jealous, or just smile at them, and I would feel confused because I know we all think we're so smart when we're teenagers, but I would feel like I could give better advice than my own mom. And that's a really confusing feeling. I remember I was a child who my dad would say, I needed to learn how to take no for an answer. So I was a child who really pushed to get what she wanted. I still probably am like that today. And I remember I would plead my case with my mom, and she would sit in agreement, and it would be so encouraging because the whole conversation would keep going like, yes, this is working out. She agrees with me. And then we'd go and talk to my dad, and she'd immediately switch and start agreeing with him. And I felt this idea that she was easy to like push over, or I don't manipulate. Sounds like such a negative term, but it just felt like I had too much power in this relationship with my mother. There were also things like, trying to learn how to do makeup, and my mom never wore makeup. And when I got my first period, I got a box of, I'm sure she got me the box of tampons, but then I had to figure it out on my own. That could have been my own independence rather than her lack of involvement. But there was just this like shifting of power, and I felt like autonomous and independent, maybe before a young girl would naturally feel that. I think there was just times where I didn't understand her. I compensated for her, and I felt like the shifting of maturity happening at a young age. We move on to when I was in college, and my mom at this point was in a pretty intense car accident, and she had a head trauma from this accident, as well as a number of other injuries. And we look back on that time and see, I remember feeling there were some like pretty obvious shifts in her personality from that experience. I always thought of my mom. My mom was such a softie. She loved like Hallmark movies, and she would always get teary at a commercial, which we would giggle at. Like, how are you crying at a commercial? I think I loved that part of her, that soft, emotional part of her. And so after the accident, that was probably the most profound change that I noticed. Is it seemed like her tears dried up. I couldn't figure out, like, it seemed like she didn't have access to that part of her mind and heart like she did previously. Her personality perhaps got quirkier, but at this point I was in college and a little more removed. My parents moved from Georgia to New York right after I graduated from college. And at this point, about a year or so into that move, my mom called me and told me that they were getting a divorce. There was so much change happening for my mom that I was really so involved in my own life in my early 20s, trying to be out on my own for the first time. I was falling in love with my now husband. I was moving forward. My parents were super far away at this point, all the way in upstate New York. And to hear that they were divorcing, to hear that my foundation of these two humans was being torn apart was very, very disorienting. It was the biggest grief I had experienced, for sure. It was very confusing because I think a lot of people assume if you're 20 or older, you're probably fine if your parents go through a divorce. But in some ways, it felt even harder because it's the only life I had known. But after the divorce, I think my mom, her quirks and personality got more extreme. At this point, a little while after the divorce, my mom moved back to Georgia and she changed her name. from Peg Sack to Maggie Branson. She went with her maiden name and changed her name to Maggie. Maggie is obviously a cute nickname for Margaret, so it makes sense, but we were all like, wait, what? I think at this point in the world, it wasn't as common for people to just change and own their identities that they wanted. And so it was more unusual for someone to change their name like that, but we embraced it. We were happy that she could find her way and be Maggie Branson. But at this point, she's living on her own. And I kept thinking like her quirks are getting more extreme. And it seems like probably the reason why is because no one's there to like counterbalance. No one's there to say, you need to stop this behavior or this is getting on my nerves the way we all do when we live with one another. She was ordering things online, like mail-in shopping, like crazy. Like she would order like 4 of the same shirt in different colors, but like already having a closet full. I'm watching her closets in this little patio home that she lived in Georgia overflowing. As one person in this house, she has 2 dressers, a walk-in closet, and she started using the additional closets in the other bedrooms for her belongings only. We started seeing like more obsessive behaviors with like going out to eat all the time. This woman used to always make food from scratch, and now she was dining out all the time. Eventually, at this point in her life, her financial situation supported those things, but eventually the money started running out because she was spending more than she should. And again, there was just this like lack of personal responsibility, self-control. We would write it all off to like, oh, mom's so special, like mom's unique, mom's quirky. And we would try to understand everything she was doing to be within a reason. But at some point, we needed to help mom get a job. My sweet sister was the point person on this and was helping mom try to write a resume, a woman who hadn't worked the majority of her life, and find some employment. And one of our stories about mom was when she ended up applying for a job at Subway. And, you just kind of think like, wow, I didn't imagine my mom's future to be making Subway sandwiches. But, any job is better than no job at this point, and we don't want our mother to become even more dependent on us. So my sister's helping my mom fill out this application. And my mom starts writing it in with her cute little script handwriting. And the first question says, when would you be able to start working? And my mom writes, ASAP. And my sister's like, you cannot write ASAP. Like, write a date. They want to know, like, use a sentence. Use your words. Then the next line was, how much would you like to make? And my mom writes, AMAP. And it's one of my favorite stories because obviously if ASAP is as soon as possible, AMAP is as much as possible, which I now use that all the time in my life. And I welcome all of you to do it as well. But my sister at the time was like, Mom, you have to write in complete sentences, and AMAP isn't even a thing. Like, she got so mad that my mom would put an abbreviation in the first place, but also make one up herself for the answer. But I think looking back, it illustrates kind of where my mom's mind was. She did get that job, but it only lasted about a week because she couldn't keep up. And so we were feeling really overwhelmed with her decline. And I think I'm starting to realize, like, at this point in my life, like, my mom's world keeps getting smaller. Like, it feels like she's contracting within herself. But I didn't have words to articulate that. It was just confusing. And it was especially confusing because the way we need our moms, the way we want our moms to step in is such a unique thing. I was talking to one of my sons who was sick the other week. He's 23. And I was like, do you need anything? And he said, Mom, I think you forget that I've been taking care of myself for a while now. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And I also know, even at my age, I still want my mom when I get sick. And I think the thing that I was feeling at this point in my mom's life is I felt like she couldn't support me in any way I needed her to. We had to support her already. So it was a confusing journey during the Maggie years. We also, we were having our own children at this point. Mom became Mamie to our children. She would walk up to everyone she met and tell them how many grandchildren she had, and she would say it so proud. But this again was one of her quirks. She would walk up to people and tell them she's Irish. She'd walk up to people and tell them she's Catholic. She'd walk up to people and tell them how many grandchildren she had. These were her points of pride. Those three things specifically. She loved if she saw a priest or a nun, she would make a beeline to them to tell them about her Catholic roots. So it was interesting to be a young mother, and I will say a young mother with a mother who felt like also a dependent on her. One story that stands out really strongly in my mind is right after I had my first child, we decided that Mom would come and stay with us because she would be such a huge support. She was so amazing with like service and care and nurture and would really do anything you asked of her. So we brought her to where we were, which was Birmingham, Alabama at this point. She was at the hospital with us. I had just given birth, and we asked her, could you go get the car and head home and meet us at the house? I was being wheeled out with the baby, and my husband Brian was taking care of me. And my mom left the room, went out to try to find her car, and circled and circled and circled and could not find her car. She just was dependent. Once again, she came back to where I was in a state of like awkward walking, needing to be wheelchaired. And I remember holding Nicholas and walking my mom to her car to help her find that car. And I thought, this is insane. Like I need her to help me. This is something she understands. Like, she gave birth to 3 kids. Like, she could be the most strong support for me. And yet here I am walking with loose hips and all the other accoutrements that accompany a recent delivery. And I'm walking her to her car. As the years progressed and our kids got older, my mom was still like a strong support, still lovely and serving and giving in that way, still delighting in her grandchildren. But still, it was this disconnect. She would come and see us, and here's a woman that tells everyone how many grandkids she has and is so proud. And she'd come to our house, and she wouldn't play with them. She wouldn't read with them. She would stand there and kind of smile at them and then follow me around. And I remember feeling so confused by that. Once again, there's just more disconnect from who I think she is and who she's acting like. I remember getting frustrated and being like, can you just read them a book? Can you sit down on the floor and play with them? I wanted my mom to have a strong relationship with my kids. I also wanted a break. Here's another adult that can come in and entertain them and give me a moment to myself to collect my thoughts. And she wouldn't do it without being told or asked. And so that was an interesting journey. As life continued on, my mom's quirks, quote unquote quirks, became even more extreme. The tales she told us were becoming more and more surreal. It started with things like, I think I saw an angel, or there's a person that's parking their car across the street and shining their light into my house, or a man and his son went into my backyard. And then it got more extreme. It turned into things like, there was a man and a woman on my roof. What were they doing on your roof? They were digging a hole in my roof. What do you think they were digging a hole for? I think they were taking the things out of my attic. By the time my mom's stories became this extreme, I remember calling my sister and saying, something is really wrong. We need to get her checked out. My sister made an appointment with a psychologist. The psychologist said, your mom has a delusional disorder. She can't live alone and she can't drive. Effective immediately. So we know now that that was not the correct diagnosis. However, it catapulted us into caregiving that we would have never guessed or expected. I kept thinking there was a logical reason for the way my mom was telling these stories. Perhaps her medication was affecting her in a negative way, or perhaps there was some sort of, I feared like a brain tumor or something like that. But delusional disorder just seemed from left field. I look back and I now see like some of those things that we were noticing in her personality and behaviors and compulsion control were all connected to what eventually we learned was a diagnosis of frontotemporal dementia. We call it FTD for short. All of those things were leading up to this diagnosis. Not having that diagnosis, it's interesting how we all compensate for the people we love when people are right under our nose and behaviors are changing. We think they're just going through something. We write it off. We grasp for the most logical or convenient explanation. Maybe fearing the worst, but not really wanting to dive into that. But I think realizing eventually when things were pretty extreme, when we got the actual diagnosis of FTD, I think it gave so much clarity and perspective about the changes we were witnessing in Mom, all the variations of who she was becoming, and even this contraction of her as a person made more sense. All the times where I felt like there was a disconnect from the things she would say about herself and the way she would behave, all the things where we thought she was just off the rails with choices and behavior, it all started to make sense under this diagnosis. I think it's interesting reflecting back to the Nick Kroll joke about moms and how easy it is for us to go to a place of annoyance. How easy it is for us to, as children, revert back to that childlike response of, but I need you. But I need you to be there for me. But what about me? And I think I had a lot of years of my life where I felt that. And it's not a response. It's not an adult response. It's a child response. And I think it illustrates and indicates how much of us are connected to our mothers and how much of us really will always long for that maternal love and care. Toward the end of my mom's life, my sister became her caregiver first. When we were told that she can't live alone and can't drive, my mom moved in with my sister and her family and lived with them for about 3 years. We thought it would be something. I remember my sister and I thinking, oh my gosh, how do we handle this news? And both of us were like, well, she can come here. And she was like, well, she can come here. We were both totally like, loved my mom visiting because she was incredibly helpful. She would always come into my house and make a beeline for, I don't know why, but our toaster oven was always the top of order. And she would find our toaster oven. And of course, it would have crumbs like all in the tray and just be really gross. And she would come to it and clean it. That was like one of the first things she would do. She would always call my sister and tell her all the things she cleaned in my house, which would just make me laugh so hard because it just would make us sound like we were just so dirty and like we made mom clean or something. But at this point in our lives, like my sister and I both were like, yeah, it would be like pretty nice to have extra hands. This was October of that year. And we were both kind of like, why don't we do this? Like, let's have mom move in and get through the holidays. Like, it'll be fine having her around. We both have her for long visits anyway. Let's have her through the holidays and then we'll make a plan. And that plan rolled into my mom living with my sister for almost 3 years. They, understandably, with their 3 very young children, got to their wits' end having mom live there. As mom progressed and her needs became more, my sister and her husband helped my mom through the selling of their home, through getting rid of all her stuff, selling her stuff and moving her in officially into their house. They got her through like getting power of attorney and like, all the medical appointments and the official diagnosis. There was some really heavy lifting that they did. And I will forever be grateful for all that they did. They were getting to their end where they felt like they needed to consider a different living option for mom. And at this point, my family was living in Oregon. My sister and my mom and brother were all living in Georgia. And I always felt frustrated by being so far away from mom and my sister and all the care needs that were so present there. I felt like I was the type of person who could show up in person way better than someone who would do a really great job at administrative work. I thought I should offer to like do the bank accounts or call the attorneys, but I always felt like, this is like so hard for me to make myself do these adult tasks, which is embarrassing to admit, but just true. And I thought I would be so much better in person. So I thought about that along the way. I thought about if mom moved into some sort of nursing home, I get to Georgia once or twice a year. And then while I'm there, I'd probably see her once or twice. And I'm like, my whole relationship with my mother will turn into a few days in the year. That's it. And I just couldn't accept that as the option for mom. And I also remember just thinking, like, we don't know how long mom is going to live, but I know when I contemplate how I want to process through someone's end of their life, I want presence. So my husband and I were in a really difficult time in our lives, but we made the choice to have mom come and move out to Oregon and live with us. Oof. When mom moved in, it was her disease was far more progressed than I realized. Her needs were more involved than I realized. We had 4 young children at the time. It was a ludicrous juggling act. I don't have a lot of memory of how I handled it because I don't think I handled things very well. And I think it was just the only word I have for it is survival mode. I think when we're in crisis like that, we just move through. And that's how I felt. She lived with us. We had her live with us for at least 6 months, maybe 6 months to a year before we felt like we also needed more extensive care for her. We had to place her in a home. We had to move her to a different home. It was really one of the hardest things I've ever done. But I remember thinking, like, I can't control a lot of this, but I can be present with her. And I remember thinking, I really want to be present with her in her final moments. And that is the gift that I can experience by having her close by. And unbeknownst to us, we made a plan to go down to LA for a friend's wedding. And it was going to be 2 nights for our family. Our family hadn't gotten away in a long time because we were in this caregiving journey. And I asked my cousin who lived in town, could she check on mom while we were down in LA? And the very first night that we were down there, I got a call that my mom had died. And I I remember just feeling I was so distraught by her death, but I just crumbled to the floor, and my family surrounded me while I wept. And I just felt so sad that I didn't get to be there with her when she died. And I think that a lot of people have told me since that often loved ones wait until you leave the room to take their final breath. Like people talk about being in the bathroom when someone goes or something like that. And I look back and I think, okay, perhaps mom did this on her own terms. And there was a moment that very week that I'll never forget where I thought I could tell my mom was perhaps toward the end of her life. And I crawled into the bed with her. She was sleeping when I visited. And I just remember thinking, like, I need to tell her that it's okay if she needs to go. And I thought maybe she doesn't know that. Maybe she doesn't know that it's okay. And so I just crawled in bed and spooned with her for a little bit. And I told her it was okay. And I look back now and I think I'm so glad I had that moment with her. I didn't get to hold her hand during her last breath, but I did get to hold her and let her go, so to speak. It's just interesting thinking back to it, like how sometimes I think the thing I miss the most is just being next to her. It's like that, the human skin-to-skin contact. And I'll always think about my mom as this little dark curly hair, Irish fair skin, cutie patootie. And one of my favorite things was just snuggling up next to her and like feeling her soft skin. She always hated her. She would, oh my gosh, my mom would avoid photos and hate pictures. And she struggled to really love herself, I think. She complained about her big butt and thighs, and we still call it the Branson butt, those of us in the family. But I think now, like, that's one of my favorite things about her is just snuggling up to her soft self and like feeling her soft skin next to me. I have a letter that I wrote to my mom that I wanted to just read out loud before we go. Mom, I miss you. I miss the safety and support I felt in your presence. I miss your silly giggles, your jiggly happy dances, and your hugger buggers. You were the person I could ask to do anything for me, knowing you'd say yes in a heartbeat. I miss your soft skin and your squishy thighs. You hated your thighs and big butt. That is obviously genetic, but I loved being next to that softness. You were so simple in so many ways, like your simple skincare routine, oil of Olay, and Vaseline lotion, or finding joy in centering your day around the most basic errand like picking up mail. You wrote letters with the same friends that you had for decades. You were also so complex. I still wonder how your mind worked. And what really motivated you. How someone so happy-go-lucky could also lose her absolute shit so quickly when something in the oven burned. I wish that we could have been kinder to you. You were so kind. I wish you wouldn't have felt the need to hide when you needed to cry, or hide when you overspent at the store, or hide the candy bar that you wanted in the checkout of the grocery store. Your little sweet tooth deserved that treat. I wish I could talk to you now about all that's happened since you left. and see how you react to the work I've done and how sweet and grown up your grandkids are. Whew. I wish I could ask you about perimenopause and get some clues about what I might expect from our genetics. I wish you could come over and clean out our toaster oven again. It's still dirty. Like you always did without us asking, and then you bragged to Jeannie about how much of our house you cleaned. I always felt like you were a little too obsessed with me when you were around, and now the lack of that love and attention is a void. You are the reason I drop anything for my kids, that I act a little silly, that I take a day off work, that I have ambition, that I over-celebrate my kids' birthdays, that I suck at cleaning my own house, so I'm trying to stop blaming you for that, that I have faith, that I'm creative, that I dance, and that I want more from my life. And you are the reason for my midlife pivot and that I'm using my voice doing this podcast. And the reason for the movie I'm making, Wake Up Maggie. Imagining you celebrating with me gives me fuel. I love you, Mom, and I will miss you till I join you. To learn more about Wake Up Maggie, visit wakeupmaggiemovie.com. This episode was brought to you by yours truly, Katie Prentiss. Produced and edited by the fabulous Lindsay Gensel. Our incredible Sunshine Soul theme music was created by the one and only Adam Sweeney. For more resources and transcripts, visit katieprentiss.com. That's Katie, Katie, Prentiss, Prentiss.com.